We gave your room to your brother's kids. Sleep somewhere else, my dad said after I drove 8 hours home for Christmas and found my bags on the porch. 2 weeks later, Mom called asking me to pay their heating bill. I said yes, opened my laptop, and by morning they were standing in the driveway looking up. My name is Nathan. I'm 31. I work as a logistics coordinator for a distribution company in Charlotte. I make decent money, not great, but enough that 4 years ago when my parents called and said the house was getting expensive, I started sending them $800 a month. They said it was for house expenses, taxes, insurance, maintenance, the water heater, whatever. I didn't ask for receipts. They're my parents. You don't ask your parents for receipts. Or at least I didn't. I'm learning that maybe you should. $800 a month for 4 years. I did that math about 6 times before it stopped feeling abstract. That's $38,400. I could say that number in my sleep now. I've said it to Marcus. I've said it to Priya. I've said it to the ceiling of my apartment at 3 in the morning. $38,400. For house expenses. Here's the thing about the money though, and this is the part that makes me feel stupid. The 800 wasn't even the beginning. When I was 22 and got my first real job after college, my parents called me 11 times over 6 years asking for emergency money. Not 800 a month. Just whenever something came up. 1,000 here because the furnace broke. 1,500 because Dad needed new tires and the transmission went at the same time. 800 because the insurance premium jumped. 2,000 because Kyle, my brother, needed help with a deposit on an apartment he moved out of 4 months later. 11 times. I added them up last month on the back of an envelope while sitting in my truck in the parking lot at work, the sun coming through the windshield making the ink hard to read. $19,200. Before the monthly payments even started. So the real number isn't $38,400. It's $57,600. I keep writing that on napkins and envelopes and the margins of work printouts. $57,600. That's a down payment on a house. That's 2 years of rent in Charlotte. That's a version of my life I didn't get to live because I was too busy being the kind of son who doesn't ask questions. Kyle is my older brother. He's 34. I need to tell you about Kyle because Kyle is the center of this, and if I don't explain Kyle, then none of what happened makes sense. Kyle has had 4 jobs since college. The first was at a logistics firm, which is funny because that's what I do now. Except Kyle lasted 7 months before his supervisor wrote him up for attendance and Kyle quit because he said the write-up was disrespectful. The second was a sales role at a building supply company that ended the same way. The third was managing a small gym, which ended when the owner found out Kyle was letting his friends work out for free and using the sauna on shift. 3 jobs, 3 versions of the same story. Kyle shows up when he feels like it and spends most of his time explaining how he'd run the place differently, how the managers are idiots, how he's being underutilized. Every time he got fired, my parents called it a bad fit. Every time I held a job for another year, nobody called it anything. The 4th job ended because Kyle started a business. I'll get to the business. The business is important. When we were kids, Kyle was the one they talked about at dinner parties. Kyle's grades. Kyle's travel soccer. Kyle's first girlfriend. I was the one who cleared the table. That's not a metaphor. I literally cleared the dishes and wiped down the counter while they talked about Kyle in the living room. My mom would hand me the sponge without looking at me, still laughing at something Kyle said, and I would take it and wipe the counter in circles until the granite squeaked. And I didn't mind. I really didn't. I'm not saying that to sound noble or sad. I'm saying it because it's the truth, and the truth is what makes this whole thing confusing. Because if I had minded, I would have stopped sending the money a long time ago. But I didn't mind being the quiet one. I just minded being the invisible one. There's a difference, and it took me 31 years and a set of bags on a porch to figure out what it was. I need to tell you something about my mom before I get to Christmas. When I was 15 and failed my driving test the first time, I came home and sat in the garage because I didn't want anyone to see that my eyes were red. My mom found me out there 20 minutes later. She didn't say anything about the test. She had 2 popsicles, the cheap ones in the plastic tubes that you cut the top off with scissors. Orange. She handed me one and sat on the concrete step next to me, and we sat there until both popsicles were done, and our fingers were sticky, and the garage smelled like fake citrus and motor oil from my dad's old mower. She never brought up the test. She never asked if I was upset. She just sat with me. I need you to know that about her, because what she did later doesn't erase that moment, but it sits next to it in a way I can't make comfortable. The woman who sat with me in a garage with a popsicle is the same woman who replied to Kyle's group chat message with a laughing emoji. I keep trying to make those two women the same person, and I can't. Or maybe they are the same person, and that's worse. I haven't figured that part out yet. Okay, Christmas. I drove 8 hours from Charlotte on December 23rd, left after work at 4:30. Hit traffic outside of Roanoke that added an hour. Got to my parents' place around 11:30 at night. The porch light was on, which I thought was nice, a small thing that felt like someone had left it on specifically for me, until I got close enough to see my bags. 2 bags. My duffel and my old backpack from college, the one with the broken zipper I keep meaning to replace. Sitting next to the front door, like someone had set them out for a yard sale. I stood there for a while, long enough that the motion sensor light clicked off and then clicked back on when I shifted my weight. My breath was visible in the cold air. The bags had a note on top tucked under the strap of the duffel. My mom's handwriting, the same handwriting from every birthday card I've ever gotten. It said, "Kyle's kids are in your room. The couch is available, or there's a Comfort Inn on Route 9 that has good rates." Like a menu. Like she was offering me options at a restaurant where every dish costs the same amount of dignity. I didn't go inside right away. I could hear the TV through the door. Someone was watching something with a laugh track, the kind of show where people are happy about something. The house smelled like cinnamon through the crack under the door, which meant Mom had been baking. Probably the cinnamon rolls she makes every Christmas Eve, the ones she used to let me pull apart while they were still hot. Which meant she had time to make the rolls and time to pack my bags and carry them to the porch and write a note with directions to a motel and tuck it under the strap of my duffel. All on the same evening. I keep thinking about that. The cinnamon and the bags. Both things happened with the same 2 hands. I went inside. Kyle was on the couch with his 2 kids asleep on either side of him, his daughter's head on his lap, and his son curled against the armrest with his mouth open. My dad was in the kitchen holding a glass of water he wasn't drinking. He looked up like he'd been expecting me, not happy or unhappy, just braced. Like a man standing in a doorway he already decided not to move from. I said, "My stuff is on the porch." He said, "Kyle's kids needed a room. They're staying through New Year's. You're here for 2 nights. I said, "I drove 8 hours. He said, "And Kyle drove 3 with 2 kids in car seats. This is my house, and I decide who sleeps where. This is my house." He said that while holding a glass of water in a kitchen with a dripping faucet, standing on a floor I'd paid to have retiled 2 years ago, in a house I'd been sending $800 a month toward for 4 years. I didn't say that. I didn't know what I know now, but I remember the sentence landing somewhere behind my ribs and staying there like a bone that didn't set right. This is my house, and I decide who sleeps where. The faucet kept dripping between his words. That small metallic tap against stainless steel, over and over, and nobody was getting up to fix it. I looked at Kyle on the couch. He was awake. I know he was awake because his jaw was tight the way it gets when he's pretending to be relaxed, and because his breathing was too even, too measured, the breathing of a person who is concentrating very hard on seeming unconscious. He didn't say anything. Didn't offer to switch rooms. Didn't sit up. Didn't say, "Hey Nate, take the room. I'll grab the couch. It's not a big deal." Just laid there with his eyes not quite closed and one hand resting on his daughter's back, performing sleep like a man who had been handed his roll before I walked through the door. I picked up my bags from the porch. The handles were cold and slightly damp from the night air. I drove to the Comfort Inn on Route 9. The woman at the front desk was watching a cooking show on her phone and barely looked up when she slid the key card across the counter. Room 114. $89 a night. I sat on the bed with my coat still on and my boots leaving dark wet marks on the beige carpet, and I didn't take either off for a long time. The heater in the wall rattled like a coin trapped in a dryer, ticking and shuddering every few seconds, and I listened to it instead of thinking. At some point I laid down. At some point the sun came through the curtain. I don't remember which came first. I left the next morning. Didn't go back to the house. Didn't text. Didn't call. I drove 8 hours home on Christmas Eve with the radio off. Just road noise and my own breathing and the sound of the tires over expansion joints on the highway that made a rhythm I couldn't stop counting. I ate leftover penne in my apartment standing at the sink because sitting down at the table felt like admitting this was my Christmas dinner. The pasta was cold and I didn't heat it up. I went to bed at 7 p.m. The family group chat was busy on Christmas Day. I checked it 12 times because I kept expecting someone to type my name. Photos of the kids tearing paper off boxes. Kyle carving the turkey, holding the knife the wrong way, grinning. My mom's pie on the counter. Kyle wearing a sweater I'd bought him 2 Christmases ago, which is a detail I wish I didn't notice, but I did. 47 messages. 0 mentions of Nathan. 0. I counted because counting felt like doing something, and doing nothing felt like agreeing with them that I wasn't worth mentioning. 3 days after Christmas, my cousin Denise called. Denise is my mom's sister's daughter, and she's the only person in the family who calls me because she wants to talk to me, not because she needs something. She has this voice that normally sounds like she just finished laughing at something, but that day it didn't. She said she'd been at the house on Christmas and noticed something pinned to the fridge with a magnet, half hidden behind a takeout menu. A printed document. My parents' will. Not finalized, clearly a draft, but obviously something they'd been working on with some kind of intent. It left the house entirely to Kyle. I wasn't mentioned anywhere. Not a sentence. Not a footnote. Not a Nathan gets the dining table or Nathan gets the toolbox in the garage. Nothing. Just Kyle. Just the house. Just $38,400 of my money maintaining a property I was never going to inherit. I was parked outside a Walgreens when she told me. The engine was running because it was 28 degrees out, and I sat there for about 40 minutes watching the gas gauge drift down and not caring. A woman walked past my car carrying a bag of dog food, and she looked like her life made sense, and I wanted to trade places with her for about 30 seconds. Just long enough to not be sitting in a truck doing math I didn't want to finish. Something nagged at me after that. Not the porch. Not the will. Not even the group chat where I didn't exist. The sentence. This is my house. The way Dad said it with his chin up, his fingers around that glass of water like a gavel. Not our house. Not the family house. My house. Like no one else had put $1 toward it. But I was paying $800 a month. Why would a man who owns his house outright need $800 a month from his younger son for house expenses? I called Marcus. Marcus is a CPA who finds errors in restaurant bills before the waiter comes back and reads footnotes on pharmaceutical commercials out loud at parties. I told him everything. He got quiet in that way where I could hear him thinking because his breathing changes, gets slower, like he's reading something invisible. Then he said, "Pull the county records. Assessor's office. It's public. I didn't know you could just do that. You can. Anyone can." I went to the county assessor's website and typed in my parents' address with my index fingers because my hands weren't steady, and the screen started telling me a different story than the one I'd been living inside for 4 years. 18 months ago, my dad refinanced the house. Took out $95,000 in equity. The monthly mortgage payment jumped from $1,200 to $2,050. An $850 increase. And according to documents linked on the county site, $40,000 of that equity went to Kyle. For Kyle's landscaping business. The one that failed in 8 months because Kyle thought buying 2 riding mowers and a trailer meant he understood horticulture. The one where a former employee filed a wage theft complaint because Kyle was skimming hours off timesheets and not paying overtime. That settlement cost $12,000. It came from the mortgage reserve. The reserve I built at $800 a month while being told it was for house expenses. Kyle's business didn't fail once. It failed twice. After the first collapse, my parents quietly took out a home equity line of credit for $35,000 more. Kyle's second attempt. For months. Done. The house now carried the refinanced mortgage and the HELOC. Total debt on a property worth maybe $280,000. Over $330,000. The house was underwater. Every month I sent $800. I was bailing water out of a boat that was already sitting on the ocean floor. Nobody told me about the water. Nobody told me about the floor. Marcus ran the numbers while eating a granola bar. I could hear the wrapper crinkling on his end, and he found the thing that made me put my forehead on the kitchen table and close my eyes. The gap between the old mortgage payment and the new one was $850. They asked me for $800, not $850, because that would have been too precise, too clean, too obviously derived from a mortgage document. Someone, and I think it was my dad because my dad is the one who does the bills, sat down with the refinance paperwork and calculated the exact amount they could pull from me each month without the number raising questions. My $800 wasn't a round number by coincidence. It was the output of an equation performed on my trust. Marcus said, They didn't just ask you for help, Nate. They did the math on you. He said it like he was reading a line item on a return. That's how Marcus delivers the worst sentence anyone's ever said to me. Like it's a column in a spreadsheet. Then I found the P.O. box. Almost missed it. One line in a chain of address records on the county site. 6 months before the refinance, all mortgage correspondence was redirected to a P.O. box registered in Kyle's name. They changed the mailing address so that when I drove 8 hours and walked through the door and looked at the kitchen counter like a normal person, I would never accidentally see a mortgage statement. Kyle set it up. Kyle who lay on that couch Christmas Eve pretending to sleep. Kyle who signed as witness on the refinance paperwork. Who watched $40,000 get extracted from a mortgage his little brother was servicing and put his name on the witness line, and then drove home for Christmas and didn't say, "Hey, Nate, there's something you should know." He just laid there with his jaw tight and his hand on his daughter's back and let his father tell me to find a motel. Denise sent me screenshots from the family group chat Christmas night after I'd already driven back to Charlotte and eaten cold pasta over a sink. Kyle wrote, "He'll cool down. He always does. Just give him a week and he'll send the January check like nothing happened." My mom replied with a laughing emoji, the same one she uses for funny cat videos. My dad didn't say anything in the chat. They were banking on my compliance. Kyle was right that I always cooled down. He was right that I always sent the check. He had 31 years of data supporting his prediction. The January check was due in 8 days, and they had calculated my forgiveness the way Marcus calculates quarterly estimated taxes, with historical data and total confidence. I sat with all of this for about a week. I went to work and attended meetings about regional shipping logistics, and I nodded when people talked, and I took notes I never read back. I made a full pot of coffee one morning, walked to the shower, got dressed, went to work, and found it sitting on the counter that evening, completely full, completely cold. I'd gone through the entire routine of making it, the grounds, the filter, the water, the button, and then forgot it existed. I watched something on my couch one night, a full episode, and when the credits rolled, I could not tell you a single character's name or what the show was about. My body was running the schedule. Everything else was in a county assessor's database reading documents filed by people who were supposed to love me. Marcus found the last piece. My parents had been claiming my $800 payments as rental income on their tax filings. They submitted a document to the mortgage company during the refinance listing a tenant paying $800 per month. That tenant was me. On a federal mortgage document, in writing, with a signature, I existed in that house. Not as a son, as a revenue line. The house where my bag sat on the porch, the house where I was told there's a Comfort Inn on Route 9, that house had my name in it the whole time. Under rental income. Marcus said what they did to qualify for the refinance was potentially mortgage fraud. He said it while chewing. I sat in my truck and traced a crack in the steering wheel vinyl with my thumb and didn't say anything for a long time. Then my mom called. January 6th, 2 weeks after Christmas. The heating system failed. She was crying. That specific kind of crying where her voice rises at the end of every sentence like she's asking you to forgive her for being upset. She said the house was cold, the kids were cold, Kyle's kids were wearing jackets inside. She needed $4,200 for an emergency repair and a deposit on a new unit. She asked if I could help. She said help like it was a small word. Like it meant nothing. Like it wasn't the same word that had cost me $57,600 over a decade. I said yes. Part of me meant it the old way. Part of me was already thinking about county records. And a smaller part, the part one don't like admitting exists, wanted to just send the money and not know what I know and go back to being the version of Nathan who clears the table and doesn't ask questions, because that Nathan had a mother who sat with him in a garage and brought him popsicles, and that felt like something worth paying $800 a month to keep believing in. I hung up, opened my laptop. 1:30 in the morning. Kitchen table. The apartment was quiet except for the refrigerator and a dog 2 floors down barking at something in the parking lot. I could smell the coffee I'd reheated from that morning, burnt and metallic, sitting in the mug with a ring forming on the surface like a tide mark. I didn't pay the heating bill. I sat there for a while with the cursor blinking on the bank's payment screen. I had the routing number. I had the amount. I had 4 years of muscle memory telling me to type the numbers and hit send and go to bed and wake up and be Nathan who helps. I could feel it in my fingers like a reflex, the way your hand reaches for a light switch in a room you've lived in for years. Except I didn't live in that room anymore. I hadn't lived in it for a long time. I just hadn't noticed. I closed the bank tab, opened my email. I emailed Priya. Everything. The refinance, the HELOC, the P.O. box, the tax filings, the witness signature, the trust, the $57,600. I attached screenshots, Marcus's calculations, the county records, and a timeline I'd written on the back of a shipping manifest at work during a break I wasn't technically allowed to take. She called me the next morning while I was brushing my teeth. I answered with toothpaste in my mouth, because when your real estate attorney calls at 7:45 a.m. you answer. She was quiet for a while after I finished talking. I could hear traffic on her end, like she was already in her car heading somewhere. Then she said, "Nathan, you're not the first person I've talked to who funded their own replacement. But you're the first one with this much paper." I heard her turn a page. She was already working. She pulled the full title history. And that's when I understood that none of this was recent. 10 years ago, when I was 21 and eating ramen in a dorm room and hadn't sent my first dollar home yet, my dad put the house in a family trust. Kyle was named successor trustee. I was not mentioned in the trust document. Not as a beneficiary. Not as a contingent. Not as anything. A decade before I started paying $800 a month, the house was legally designed to pass to Kyle. Every dollar of the $57,600 I sent over 10 years went toward maintaining a property that was structured in a signed and filed legal document to belong to my brother. They knew where the house was going. They knew who was paying for it. Those were two different people, and they were comfortable with that. I filed to recover funds sent under false pretenses. Priya drafted the paperwork. I sent my parents a certified letter containing the county records, the bank statements, the trust documents, the tax filings, and a note. Priya wanted it clinical. I wrote 6 words, "You're right. It's your house. Pay for it." The letter arrived on a Tuesday. My dad called that night. Not apologetic. Loud. The Doug voice where he talks slower and raises the volume like that's the same thing as being right. He said, "You think some lawyer scares me? This is family business, Nathan. You don't air family business." I let the silence go. I let it get uncomfortable. Then I said, "Read page 3. The county records. Then call your own lawyer." I could hear him breathing through his nose, heavy and fast, the way he breathes when he's deciding between yelling and hanging up. 12 seconds of nothing. I counted. He hung up. 9 days before he called again, and when he did, I didn't answer. Kyle came to my apartment 4 days after the letter. I opened the door, and he was in the hallway with his jacket unzipped and his sneakers untied and sweat on his forehead in January. He said, "Look, I know Dad messed up. But the kids, Nate. Think about the kids. They didn't do anything." His hands were opening and closing at his sides, gripping nothing, the way he's always done when he's nervous since we were boys. I said, "I did think about your kids. For 4 years. $800 a month. That was me thinking about your kids. Where were you?" His mouth opened, closed, opened again. Nothing came out. He stood there. Then he turned and walked down the hallway, and his untied sneakers squeaked on the tile. He texted that night, "You're going to destroy this family." I read it. Put the phone face down. Made eggs. Or maybe toast. It didn't matter. Denise told the family. Everything. The refinance, the money, the P.O. box, the trust, the tax claim, the county records, the certified letter. She told her mom, who told my uncle, my dad's brother, a man named Gary who runs a plumbing company and doesn't talk much, but when he does, people listen. My uncle called my dad, and Denise told me what he said. "You refinanced your house to fund Kyle's business with Nathan's money, and then put Nathan's bags on the porch?" My dad apparently stood in his kitchen and said nothing. My uncle waited. My dad still said nothing. My uncle hung up. Within a week, 3 family members called me. Not to get the story. They already had it. They called to say they were sorry. My aunt said, "I always thought you were helping because you wanted to. I didn't know they were taking." 2 family members stopped speaking to my parents entirely. My uncle said he was ashamed to share a last name with his own brother. He said it to my dad's face, apparently, at a gas station where they ran into each other. In front of other people. My dad, who has spent his entire adult life managing how the family perceives him, whose reputation in the extended family was the one thing he polished with more care than his own house, who would rather miss a bill than miss a family barbecue because image was the currency he actually valued, went quiet. Not the quiet of a man who's sorry. The quiet of a man who's been seen and doesn't have a version of the story that works anymore. The narrative he'd been running for 30 years, that he was the patriarch holding things together, that Kyle was finding his way, that Nathan was happy to help. All of it collapsed in a week because Denise had screenshots and county records and a cousin who was tired of watching from the inside. Without my $800, they missed the first mortgage payment in 45 days. Bank sent a warning notice. My dad tried to renegotiate the terms, but his credit, gutted by the Helic and Kyle's debts, didn't qualify for any restructuring. The bank gave one option: sell or face foreclosure within 90 days. The house that was my house. The house where I was told to sleep somewhere else on Christmas Eve. The bank owns more of it than my father ever did, and he'd been performing ownership with my money holding the curtain up. I don't know if they're going to sell. Denise says they're talking about it, but my dad won't look at listings and my mom cries every time someone brings it up. They've lived there for 32 years. I grew up in that house. My height marks are still on the doorframe of the pantry, pencil lines with my name and Kyle's name and dates going back to when I was 4. I try not to think about the doorframe. I try not to think about a lot of things in that house. The heating was never properly fixed. They're running space heaters from Walmart, the small plug-in kind that smell like hot dust. The homeowner's insurance, Denise told me, was canceled 3 months before Christmas to save money. The house is uninsured. If a pipe bursts, if a heater tips, the mortgage company can demand the full loan balance immediately. I didn't do that. They did, cutting coverage on a house they were sinking, then calling me to throw money at a heating system in a property that was one accident away from total financial collapse. I was the last load-bearing wall, and they kicked me out and expected the ceiling to hold. Kyle can't cover any of it. His personal debt beyond the 2 business failures is $23,000. Credit cards maxed across 3 different accounts. A defaulted car loan on a truck he bought during the first business attempt because he said he needed it for the crew and then kept it after the crew was gone. A small claims judgment from a former landlord he stiffed on 3 months of rent before moving back in with my parents. The $40,000 from the refinance didn't even clear Kyle's existing debts before the landscaping business started. Some of that money went straight to credit card companies and collections agencies before a single piece of equipment was bought, before a single client was signed, before a single employee was hired and then not paid correctly, before the wage theft settlement that was funded by the mortgage reserve that was built by the son who was sleeping at the Comfort Inn on Route 9 with his boots still on. I keep trying to trace the path of my money through Kyle's failures, and it's like watching water disappear into sand. You can see where it went. You just can't get it back. 6 months later, my dad left a voicemail. I was at my desk eating a ham sandwich when my phone lit up with his name. I watched it ring. Let it go. The voicemail was 47 seconds. I listened to it in my car after work, parked in the lot with the engine off and the windows up. The car was getting warm, but I didn't open anything. He said, "Your mother misses you. I don't know how to fix this. I don't think I can." His voice was smaller than I'd ever heard it. Not the Doug voice. Something underneath it. There was a pause in the middle, 4 or 5 seconds, where I think he was deciding whether to say something else and then decided he couldn't. I saved it. Put the phone in the cup holder. Sat there. Listened to it again 3 weeks later. On a Tuesday, same parking spot, same cup holder. Still haven't called back. I don't know what I would say that would be the right amount of honest. Part of me wants to call him. Part of me wants to never hear his voice again. And a smaller part, the part that still lives in a garage with a popsicle and orange-stained fingers and a mother who sat with him without asking why, wants to hear his voice say one thing. Not sorry. Not an explanation. Not family business. Just Nathan. Said like it weighs something. Said like it costs him something to say it. Last Tuesday night, I made my first mortgage payment on my own apartment. Not $800 to a house where I exist only as a line item on a tax return. My own place. My name on the lease. My name on the mailbox. I sat at the same kitchen table, same laptop, same chair I've been sitting in since December when I started pulling county records at 2 in the morning like a man who lost something and went looking for it and found something worse instead. It was a little after 2 a.m. again, because apparently that's the hour when I make the decisions that rearrange my life. I typed in the amount, $1,140, and hit confirm. The screen changed to a receipt page. My name. My address. My apartment number. Not a trust I'm excluded from. Not a P.O. box designed to hide things from me. Mine. I closed the laptop. The apartment was quiet. The refrigerator hummed the way it does when there's nothing else competing with it. A low, steady sound I've stopped noticing except in moments like this when the noise of everything else finally stops. The coffee next to me was cold again because I always make it and forget it. The mug had a ring inside it. The receipt said $1,140. It was the cheapest thing I'd paid for in 4 years. Would you have kept sending the $800 after seeing the county records? Or would you have stopped before the porch? Tell me. Subscribe. Next one drops soon.